Feds, many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
To Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. First thing I kind of want to dive into is kind of get into the economy here. And, you know, we've kind of seen a lot of the overshadowing of this. And, of course, we got the debates and everything. I want to go ahead and get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report, and then I got a couple articles, and then we'll kind of maybe, if I can, cover some of these debate issues here. I'm working on that right now, but let's go ahead and get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report. And this one is titled, The Fed's Interest Rate Dilemma, Ron's Take.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Tomorrow is a big day in monetary history. The Fed is getting ready to announce what they're going to do about interest rate, and the world waits with bated breath. Everybody is watching worldwide. It is a big deal. In spite of the fact that the system that we have is ridiculous and ineffective and is going to fail, right now, though, everybody is watching this, and one little word can make all the difference in the world. All the Fed needs to do is say, yes, we're raising interest rates. No, we will not raise interest rates. It'll make big difference. Right now, I would say the markets are discounting any raising in the interest rate anytime soon from the way the market's reacting. I've been on record for many years that the Fed won't do this, but that doesn't mean that they won't eventually do it. But right now, I'd be really pretty surprised if tomorrow there's an announcement that says that interest rates are going up. Right now, today, gold has gone up, and on the short run, gold has been going up when the Fed keeps interest rates very low. There are other reasons for gold going up. At the moment, on the short term, the gold goes up if they think they will keep the monetary money flowing. Same way, stocks have been recovering a little bit from their downturn, and on today, it's anticipating that the Fed is not going to have a sudden announcement and raise these rates. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the silliness of the program. Here we have 12 individuals in a room, a secret room, unelected officials, and they're pretending to know what the interest rates ought to be. You know, 7 are permanent members of the Fed, and the New York Fed president, he's a permanent member. Then there are 4 regional banks. They get together in secret, and they have this pretense that they know, okay, what should we do? And the real problem is they believe they're smart enough to figure out. My argument is they don't have the vaguest idea what interest rates are, because nobody in the world knows what interest rates should be. because just as all prices should be set in the marketplace, it takes hundreds, thousands, millions of people buying and selling, borrowing and lending and saving to make these determinations. But the officials in central banking actually deceive themselves. Some believe it in a philosophic sense, in an academic sense, that this is good and proper and they're doing the Lord's work and this is why it's working. Others are very much aware of the power that can be wielded in central banking. And that is why you see not average people going to become members of the central banks. They usually have a strong relationship with Wall Street and the banking industry, both domestic and international. And that's a driving force. But I have met Federal Reserve Board members and others who really believe in this, almost like a religious belief that the world would be totally chaotic if you didn't have smart people doing central economic planning by manipulating interest rate and monetary policy. Well, I'm a strong disbeliever in that. I don't believe it is possible. And, you know, somebody that I learned this lesson from, I want to put up a quote from him, and that is Friedrich Hayek. And Hayek is the one and only Austrian economist that won a Nobel Prize. And Hayek won that prize in 1974. Interestingly enough, in the early 1980s, he was in Washington, D.C., and I was a member of Congress in the Banking Committee at the time, and was fortunate enough to have dinner with him, which really was a fascination for me to sit down and spend an evening with him. But he is well known for a statement and a concept that he called the pretense of knowledge. And the quote is on the screen right now. It says, to act on the belief that we possess the knowledge and the power which enable us to shape the processes of society entirely to our liking, knowledge which in fact we do not possess, is likely to make us do much harm. Well, there can't be anything more straightforward than that, because I think he's been proven absolutely right. And look at the harm done with the manipulation. But the potential harm that is coming up now is much greater than ever before, and that's why there's so much attention given to this announcement that will be coming tomorrow, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. And there will be a lot of people waiting and watching. But it still just blows my mind thinking a yes or no might make the difference. Might make the difference of billions of dollars? No. Trillions of dollars instantaneously. And even though there may be some quick reactions to what they say, it won't be the permanent reaction, because there's the long term too. The traders will react immediately to what is said or implied, and sometimes it's vague and sometimes people have to anticipate. But the one thing is if tomorrow they say, no, we're going to hold the line, or they say we're going to raise it 0.25%, they're going to raise the interest rates, which is minuscule, and immediately after that happens, that will be discounted. Then they will be starting to anticipate, well, when are they going to do it again? What will happen in 4 weeks? What will happen in 6 weeks? What is the Fed going to do? And it just goes on and on. But this time it's been longer than usual. This is why it's historic. We've had the dollar reserve standard, paper standard, since 1971. And they hobbled along with this, with many recessions and financial bubbles and bursts that have happened. And we're still in a recession that started in 2008. But the Federal Reserve, because they're addicted to interest rates and the economy is dependent on forever pumping in liquidity and so-called capital, and we don't depend on savings and we don't operate with a free market, they haven't raised interest rates in 10 years. Not that I think they should have or could have or known what to do, but just in relationship to their policy, they haven't touched it for 10 years. And, of course, it's been at 0% for more than 6 years. And when Greenspan, even before Bernanke, people said, well, he's brought this crisis on because he kept interest rates too low too long. So the solution since that time has been to take interest rates down to zero, which makes no sense whatsoever. You know, today I noticed that the gold price has bumped up, a significant amount in reaction to their anticipation. And for it to go up $15 to $20 means that they're pretty confident that there's not going to be an announcement that all of a sudden interest rates would rise. But one thing that people make an assumption, and on the short run, in the current condition it is true, that if they raise interest rates and the dollar goes up a little bit, it might be harmful to gold. But there are other conditions when the market pushes interest rates up. If the interest rates go up and there's inflationary pressures, it could cause gold to explode, which is exactly what happened in 1970. So to have a computer model to predict what will happen if they raise or lower interest rates just doesn't hold. Conditions do change all the time, and that's what they can't predict. I am going to suggest in the form of a prediction that history will show. Exactly when that history will come, I don't know. It could be in 5 years, it could be 10 or 15. But history will show, and there are individuals now already reflecting on current status. They're going to look back and look at this as the craziest monetary history that they have ever seen, with what the world is being sustained with by this inflation and the QE and the computers running with no results, and they still want to do the same thing. The silliest notion I heard was, well, we need to get the interest rates up a little bit now because there will probably be a recession not far in the future. I think definitely there will be. They say, we won't have anything we can do. The only thing we know to do is is to lower interest rates and print more money. But that is about the most ridiculous reason to raise interest rates. But this whole idea that the Fed should decide the supply of money and what the price should be, the interest rates, is socialism in money. That means one half of the economy is socialized, because you have the supply of goods and services, and you have measuring those supplies in a currency. It used to be that we had a stable currency and we could define it and define what a dollar was, but that doesn't happen. So the job is to try to bring these together, but nobody can define a dollar, and therefore there is no way that they can anticipate. So it becomes a monopoly. Now, the one thing characteristic of a monopoly, and I believe that the only true monopoly are government monopolies, and though a lot of people argue the Fed is not part of the government, it's the government and the people that allowed it to be created, but they are created by legislation. They've been tolerated, but they do have a monopoly control over a lot of what's going on in the economy. That's why they can be so bold that they believe they can regulate stock prices, and they do a lot of that, but eventually that isn't possible. That's the reason they come up with these schemes that when their policies are failing, that they say, well, the stock might go down, so we have to have a plunge protection team. We have to have the government interfering and prop up prices. They've tried it in Japan. They've tried it in China. We do it all the time. We do it constantly. That is all artificial. But another characteristic of monopolies, it serves the interest as long as they exist and they benefit from the power they get from government. There's going to be groups that benefit and other groups would suffer. And this is one of the reasons why we have the discrepancy in wealth distribution. And now we have socialists running and populists running and saying, oh, isn't it horrible that you have the rich and the poor, and we have to use the force of government to redistribute laws, redistribute the wealth, right, and regulate the economy and all this. Well, that's just more trouble. As Hayek pointed out, it breeds more trouble. And they can't do it is the big problem, because the power is so strong. But it will serve the interests, and this is it. The middle class gets wiped out under these conditions, and the very wealthy do benefit. But the whole problem that I see politically is that anybody who has wealth is blamed for it. Not just the people who have had special privileges from the Fed and got their bailouts and they get their contracts from government and they're in the military-industrial complex and all these things. They're not the people that they sort out. They say anybody with wealth, and they come down with these solutions. Well, wealthy people ought to be taxed 90%. Well, we've tried that in the past. So the monopoly idea is just horrible. In money, it is extremely bad. But what I see happening today, and especially tomorrow, is us getting awfully close to the day when this quits working. The markets always win out in the end. This type of a monetary system causes a couple things. It causes too much debt and malinvestment. We have too much debt and we have too much malinvestment, which are the bubbles, too much money buying bonds that aren't worth anything, and too much money in stocks that are still in a bubble formation. So the market says this has to be corrected. And when they recognize it, the market forces are powerful. So we talk about deflationary pressures, and we have to stop the deflationary pressures. And, of course, the government and the politicians want inflationary pressures, even though that has been the basic problem. So they keep arguing back and forth. But the deflationary pressures always win, but not always in the sense of all of a sudden the money supply shrinks like it did in the 30s. We have money managers now that will not let the money supply shrink, but they have lost total control of where the money will go. And that's the problem that they face. But under these conditions, when there's excessive malinvestment and excesses in the economy, and especially too much debt, it has to be liquidated. The debt has to be liquidated. And in a way, the Fed knows that. And in a way, they're sort of saying a prayer, let's liquidate the debt a little faster. That's why they talk about, if we could only get the CPI going up at 2% a year, this liquidation will be smooth and orderly. But the truth is they can't control it, and that'll get out of whack too. But the basic flaw is in central banking. The basic flaw actually started with the authority by our government giving the Fed the authority to manipulate and regulate money. And since that time, all we have done was try to write more regulations to try to correct the mistakes that the Fed has created. So we're at a milestone and an opportunity, because as this failure becomes more apparent, changes will have to come, and hopefully we come up with sensible changes. This is also the reason that we have to concentrate on knowing more about the Fed. 12 guys, women too, in a secret room, figuring out something that there's no way they can know. They do not have this wisdom. This will end, and it has to end, and we will have to have a system someday where the market's allowed to operate. We know that most economists in this country would never vote for wage and price controls. But this is equal to wage and price controls of all the economy because it's price controls of money. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's very, very dangerous. It's dangerous because poverty prompts people to say and do dumb things in a more authoritarian way. And also the system that we've had has provided the financing for the senseless wars that are going on around the world. So we have runaway welfare, runaway warfare, and we have runaway control of the special interests in powerful places who benefit from the Federal Reserve. What we need is a true audit of the Federal Reserve so we know exactly what we're dealing with. The American people are with us on the audit. So the sooner we get an honest audit, the better off we will be. Anyway, I'm sure I will be talking about this tomorrow after the announcement made, and a lot of other people will be talking about it. But I just hope they would talk about it in the sense of honest money and why we need to get rid of the culprit who had brought this crisis to our doorstep and the discrepancy in wealth distribution. And that has to do with the Fed. The sooner the people understand this, the sooner the people in Washington will understand it. And right now we have put more pressure on Congress than ever before because in the last 4, 5, 6 years, we have gotten a national attention about auditing the Fed and the importance of the Fed. So we're moving in that direction, and as its failure becomes more apparent, more Americans will wake up and say, what's going on with this Federal Reserve? Maybe we ought to consider, a new monetary system, and we don't need to give so much power to the Federal Reserve. The sooner the better as far as I'm concerned. I thank you for tuning in today, and please come back to the Liberty Report soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Now, I do want to get into the debate here in a second, but I want to cover something. Since we're talking about this, we constantly hear about, things are getting better. We just had Obama come out. I have an article I posted. It's on Breitbart. It says it's titled America is winning right now. America is great right now. And that's with a record 94, I believe it's 94,031,000 Americans no longer in the workforce. And then here's another article. Overall income 6.5% lower than when recession began, down 1.5 since last year. And this one's coming out of freebeacon.com. Median household income declined to $53,657 in 2014. It figures 6.5% lower than in 2007, the year before the recession began, and 1.5% lower than last year, according to data released Wednesday from the U.S. Census Bureau. From 2007 to 2014, median household incomes declined $3,700. From 2013 to 2014, the decline was $805. According to the census, median household income divides the income distribution into two, so half of incomes are greater and half of incomes are less than the median. In 2014, median incomes were $56,866 for white households, $42,491 for Hispanic households, and $35,398 for black households. Since the recession began, black households have seen the largest decline in incomes, declining by $3,273 or 8.4%. White households saw the second largest decline since the recession, declining $2,640 or 4.4%. Hispanics saw a 3.8% decline in incomes in the same time frame. From 2013 to 2014, median household incomes declined for both white and black households, but increased for the most for Hispanic. Incomes for white and black households declined 1.4% from the previous year, while Hispanics saw incomes increase 5.3%. And the article goes on, and again, that's from freebeacon.com. So we definitely are seeing a complete decline in the ability to prosper under the system, and a lot of it has to play into this monetary system and the manipulation, not just in the monetary system, throughout the whole economy. And that plays into regulations, that plays into monetary policy, and a lot of other things. Give me a second here. I'm going to cut into a little bit here of the debates. So let's go ahead and cut over to some of the debates here.
A woman named Karen for 25 years who was the love of my life.
Rick Santorum.
Hi, I'm Bobby Jindal. Now look, I don't have a famous last name. My daddy didn't run for president. I don't have a reality TV show. I'll tell you what I do have. I've got the backbone, I've got the bandwidth, I've got the experience to get us through these tough times, to make sure that we don't turn the American dream into the European nightmare. Thank you for having me today.
This is the first run, the ones that didn't make it onto the main stage.
Well, and thanks, CNN, for having people at this debate. I'm Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, in case you can't tell. I want to thank Ms. Reagan for inviting me. It means the world to me. I'm the only candidate tonight who served in the military while Ronald Reagan was our president and our commander-in-chief. It's one of the highlights of my life. I'm running for president to destroy radical Islam, to win the war on terror, to protect you and your family. And in that quest, I have an uncompromising determination to win this war, just like President Reagan had an uncompromising determination to destroy the evil empire and win the Cold War. Above all others, on both sides of the aisle, I am most qualified to be Commander-in-Chief on day one. 33 years in the Air Force, 35 trips to Iraq and Afghanistan. I understand this war. I have a plan to win it, and I intend to win it.
Thank you, candidates. We're going to talk a lot about policy and your proposals this evening, but first, Governor Jindal, I want to start with you. You have said that the frontrunner, Donald Trump, is a, quote, unstable, narcissistic egomaniac. Now, we are in the house of Reagan, who made famous the so-called 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of thy fellow Republican. What drove you to violate that unofficial commandment?
Well, Jake, I'm in compliance with the 11th commandment, and I would tell my fellow Republicans, let's stop treating Donald Trump like a Republican. If he were really a conservative, and 30 points ahead, I would endorse him. He's not a conservative. He is not a liberal. He's not a Democrat. He's not a Republican. He's not an independent. He believes in Donald Trump. Here's the reality. The idea of America is slipping away. $18 trillion of debt. Planned Parenthood selling baby parts across our country. Our government's creating a new entitlement program when we can't afford the government we've got today. We've got a president who won't even say the words radical Islamic terrorism. He's declared war on trans fats and a truce with Iran. Think about that. He's more worried about Twinkies than he is about the Ayatollahs having a nuclear weapon. That is what is happening. The idea of America is slipping away. We must not let that happen on our watch. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rescue the idea of America, the choice for conservatives. Do we depend on proven conservative principles like Ronald Reagan did? Or do we turn this over to a narcissist who only believes in himself?
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Jake.
Senator Santorum, do you think Governor Jindal is wrong for attacking your party's frontrunner?
I think personal attacks just please one person, Hillary Clinton. And all we do when we go after each other, and we've seen a bunch of it, from people up on this stage, people who are going to be on the stage afterwards, who go after and make personal attacks on people. There are plenty of policy differences between the candidates up here and the candidates later. Donald Trump has every right to run for president as a Republican, as anybody else in this audience. And he may have positions that I disagree with, but he has the right to do that, and the people should be given the benefit of the doubt to be able to see through those things. I don't think it helps when Republicans attack Republicans personally. I'll say some things tonight which will be very big differences. The issue of immigration is one that there are huge differences in this field, and I will be out there talking about how we have to control immigration, how we have to look after the American worker. The focus of this debate should be on how we're going to win this election and help improve the quality of life for American workers. And we aren't doing that when we're out there picking at each other and calling each other names. The name we should be calling out is, what are we going to do for average Americans who are losing ground in America today? And that should be our focus.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Jindal, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. Look, the reality is Hillary Clinton is gift-wrapping this election to us. They're running their weakest candidate. They've got a socialist that is gaining on Hillary Clinton. Folks, you can't make that up. A socialist is doing well in the Democratic primary. The best way for us to give this election back would be to nominate a Donald Trump. He'll either implode in the general election Or if, God forbid, if he were in the White House, we have no idea what he would do. You can't just attack him on policy. He doesn't care about policy. It's not enough to say he was for socialized medicine or higher taxes.
Thank you, Governor.
He's not serious.
And Senator Santorum, just to assure you, we will get to those issues, but just a couple more on this general subject. Senator Graham, you've called Donald Trump a, quote, wrecking ball for the Republican Party. Voters in your home state of South Carolina in a recent poll prefer Donald Trump 30% to your 4%. How do you explain why so many of your constituents would rather have Donald Trump as the Republican nominee than you?
Well, all I can say, if you looked at polling in 2012 and 2008 at this level, we'd have this stage, you'd have President Perry and President Giuliani. We've got a long way to go. And here's what I'm going to try to do tonight, convince you that I'm best qualified to be Commander-in-Chief for the 1% who are doing the fighting for the rest of us. And we're going to have a serious discussion tonight. All of us are going to say we want to destroy ISIL. But here's what I'm going to tell you. What we're doing is not working. I have a plan to do it. If I'm President of the United States, we're going to send more ground forces into Iraq because we have to. President Obama made a huge mistake by leaving too soon against sound military advice. To every candidate tonight, are you willing to commit before the American people that you will destroy ISIL and you understand we need a ground force to do it? Are you willing, Jake? Please ask everybody the following question. Would you go from 3,500 to 10,000 American boots on the ground in Iraq to destroy ISIL? Because if you don't, we're going to lose. Are you willing to send American combat forces into Syria as part of a regional army? Because if you don't, we'll never destroy ISIL in Syria. If you're not ready to do these things, you're not ready to be Commander-in-Chief.
Thank you, Senator Graham.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there for a minute. I kind of want to touch on something, and this was an article out of Reason. And just because they were bringing up Reagan quite a bit, there's an article how Ronald Reagan's ghost haunts the GOP. So the second GOP candidate is taking place tonight for the varsity squad. Reason will be all over it right here. It says here it's being staged at the Reagan Library, California, because 21st century Republican Party has an unkillable love affair with Dutch that is more indestructible than the one between Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal, Brokeback Mountain. And this basically goes on to say how the love affair with Ronald Reagan has come so much we kind of forget that, you know, maybe it wasn't the best time for everyone. You'll have to read it. I'm going to kind of get back into the debate here real quick, but it's an interesting read. And don't forget, you know, the Iran-Contra and, you know, the importation of cocaine and all that happened under Reagan. So let's not forget that.
Are doing well is because they are political outsiders. In fact, that's one of the things. There are two things that they have in common. They've never been elected to office before, and they're doing better than all of you in the polls. The four of you have a combined 7 decades in elected office. Senator Graham, in this election season, do Republican voters see your service in government as a liability and not an asset?
Well, what I hope Republican voters, Libertarian, vegetarians, Democrats, you name it, will look for somebody to lead us in a new direction, domestically, but particularly on the foreign policy front. President Obama is making a mess of the world. What I'm trying to tell you here tonight, that Syria is hell on earth, and it's not going to get fixed by insulting each other. I've been there 35 times to Iraq and Afghanistan. I am ready to be Commander-in-Chief on day one. I've been in the military 33 years, 140 days on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan. I am so ready to get on with winning a war that we can't afford to lose. I hope you believe that experience matters. It's an all-volunteer force, folks. When you vote for Commander-in-Chief, they're stuck with your choice. We've had one novice being Commander-in-Chief. Let's don't replace one novice with another. And if I thought I could win this war without more American ground forces in Iraq and Syria, I would tell you, but we can't.
Thank you, Senator.
If we don't get on with this, they are coming here.
Thank you, Senator. Let's turn to the topic of immigration. For that, I want to bring in my colleague, Dana Bash.
Senator Santorum, Governor Jindal has supported a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants once the border is secure. Why do you disagree with that?
Well, in fact, just about everybody in this field supports some pathway to citizenship. There are just a few. Governor Jindal, Senator Cruz, Senator Rubio, Jeb Bush, a lot of others, Senator Graham, all support some sort of amnesty at some point in time or another. And this is really the interesting thing about this whole debate. This debate should not be about what we're going to do with someone who's here illegally. This debate should be about, well, what every other debate on every other policy issue is in America. What's in the best interest of hardworking Americans? What's in the best interest of our country? We've had a focus because the other side has set up for us, here is who we have to be concerned about on the issue of immigration. And someone who's here illegally and their family, and what are we going to do about them? A great leader will say that the objective of every law in America is to do what's in the best interest of America. And what's in the best interest of America right now is to look at wages, look at employment among wage earners. 70 to 90% of people who have come into this country, 35 million over the last 20 years, are wage earners that are holding wages down, taking jobs away from America.
I want to get the governor to respond to that.
I want to clarify. I want to make very clear that everybody understands my position is we need to secure the border, period. Any talk of doing any more, we don't need a comprehensive plan. We don't need a 1,000-page bill like the Gang of Eight. We don't need amnesty. Everybody in D.C. talks about it. We need to get it done. As president, I'll get it done in 6 months. It won't be perfect, but we can get it done. I'm not for amnesty. We do need to secure the border. A smart immigration makes our country stronger. Right now, we've got a weak one. One of the things I've said, and I know the left, I know Hillary didn't like this, immigration without assimilation is invasion. We need to insist that people come here legally, learn English, adopt our values, roll up their sleeves, and get to work. We do need to secure the border.
Senator Santorum, do you buy that the governor's not for amnesty?
Well, just because you don't call it amnesty doesn't mean that what almost everybody in this field is for is allowing people who are in this country illegally, people who broke the law to come into this country, people who came here legally and overstayed, to stay in America. Again, we have 35 million people. We have the highest percentage of immigrants in this country, as far as numbers ever, as far as percentage, the highest in 105 years. Wages are flatlined. The reason that you're seeing the angst and the anger out there, and the reason this issue has taken off, is because workers in America know that their wages are being undermined. If you look at from the year 2000 to the year 2014, there are 5.7 million net new jobs created. What percentage of those jobs are held by people who weren't born here? The answer is all of them. The fact is American workers are getting
Senator,
hurt by immigration, and that's why they're upset.
Your time is up. And, Governor, I'm sorry, you really need to clarify your position, because you say you're not for amnesty, but you have been for a path to citizenship.
Dan, that's not right. What I've said consistently is secure the border. I've said after that is done, the American people will deal with the folks that are here pragmatically and compassionately. Now, Rick, if he wants to say that Senator Rubio or Jeb or others for amnesty, that's his right. I'm not for amnesty. I've never been for amnesty. Will never be for amnesty. Secure the border. We don't need to do that as a comprehensive bill. I've also said we need to put an end to sanctuary cities. It's not enough to defund them. I think we need to criminalize, accuse, and jail those mayors and councilmen as accessories for the crimes committed by people who shouldn't be here in the first place.
Thank you, Governor.
Dana.
I want to change the subject. We're staying on immigration, and I'm bringing you in, Governor Pataki, and Senator Graham, I'm coming to you as well.
Thank you.
Governor Pataki, Republicans right now are debating birthright citizenship, the policy of granting U.S. citizenship to every baby born in this country, even if they are born to undocumented immigrants. Senator Graham wants to end the policy of birthright citizenship. Governor Pataki, you support keeping it. Tell him why he's wrong.
Yeah, it's a small part of a very important issue. And let me comment on what my colleagues were saying here. We all agree you have to secure the border. We have to make sure that people come to America legally. That has got to be step one. Step two is we have to stop releasing criminals into the communities. If you are charged with a crime as an illegal alien, you should either be in jail or be deported. You should not be released, as the Obama administration has done. Of course, we should outlaw sanctuary cities and hold them responsible. But we can't ignore 11 million people who are here. What are we going to do? We're not going to send them back, despite somebody saying we're going to drag kids out of classrooms and send them back. But we have to send a message that we are a nation that depends on the rule of law. And when your first act is to break the law, there has to be a consequence. So what I would do is require those who want to have legal status, not citizenship, come forward, acknowledge they broke the law, and if they do it again, they can be immediately deported, and then do what we do in communities across America when we want to sanction someone.
Thank you, Governor.
And that is community service. 200 hours, working in a hospital,
Governor,
working in a school, and then they could have legal status.
What I asked about was about birthright citizenship and why you think that we should preserve birthright.
I don't think that we should tell that child born in America that we're going to send it back. The way to avoid that is to have an intelligent immigration policy where we know who is coming here, why they are coming here, so we don't have this flood of people coming here for the wrong reason.
Senator Graham, most countries in the world do not have birthright citizenship.
Probably for a good reason.
Why do you think Governor Pataki is wrong?
Well, let's talk about immigration. Number one, I like Rick. I don't remember the Santorum plan when I was in the Senate. The peanut gallery on this is interesting. I have been trying to solve this problem for a decade. There are no Democrats here tonight. If you're here, raise your hand. You went to the wrong... Well, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. The bottom line, I'm trying to fix the problem. We're not going to deport 11 million people here illegally, but we will start with felons and off they go. As to the rest, you can stay, but you got to learn our language. I don't speak it very well, but look how far I've come. Speaking English is a good thing. You got to pay taxes. You got to pay a fine. You got to get back in line. You've got to secure your border. They'll keep coming. If you don't control who gets a job, it never ends. We've got two borders, one with Canada, one with Mexico. I've never met an illegal Canadian. This is an economic problem. So, folks, let's solve it. Amnesty is doing nothing, and that's what we've been doing. As to birthright citizenship, once we clean up this mess, in the future, prospectively.
Okay, I'm wondering, any of the listeners that are in the chat room, what you feel about immigration, illegal immigration, and amnesty. Go ahead and leave your comment in the chat room, and we'll see kind of where the consensus in the chat room is.
Comprehensive Border Security Bill, which did, in fact, put the resources to build the fencing and deploy the troops and the technology necessary.
What did you do with the 11 million?
As you know, Lindsay,
what are you going to do with the 11 million?
As you know, 40 to 60% of the 11 million are here on visa overstays. We know exactly who they are. We should know where they are, but we have a government that doesn't tell them to return home. You can solve half of the problem with the 11 million by simply telling the 11 million that they have to return to their country of origin. So that's half your problem.
How many Democrats supported your plan? How many Democrats did you have on your bill?
I don't know how many Democrats I had on my bill.
None.
But the point is, the point is that I had a bill and
that went nowhere.
Well, you're right, Lindsay. It went nowhere because we had a president back then who was for more comprehensive immigration reform than I was.
George W. Bush.
That's right.
Who won with Hispanics?
You know what we need to do, Lindsay, is we need to win. We need to win fighting for Americans. We need to win fighting for the workers in this country who are hurting, including Hispanics. The people who are hurt the most by illegal immigration are Hispanics.
In my world, Hispanics are Americans.
The folks who are hurt the worst are recent immigrants. By illegal immigrants coming to this country, last year alone, 700,000 illegal immigrants came into this country. Who do you think are most impacted? It's the folks who came into this country, played by the rules, did what they were supposed to do, came here and went to work, and now they're finding themselves out of work because someone illegally is willing to come in and work for less.
I have a little different take on where the country is going on this issue. Number one, and
okay, you know what? My whole issue with this is a lot of this has been complicit with the illegal immigration, and we know why. When they are illegal, you don't have complete records of everything that these people are doing. They're able to basically work through the system, get underpaid, but pay good in their home of Mexico, so they can go and take their money and send it back to family and actually be able to live a better life. But what that does is it undermines a system that we're all forced to be a part of, where it comes to paying taxes and making sure that you're above minimum wage, which maybe the minimum wage will work a little bit better without the illegal immigration, but it's still going to not ever work out right. But again, it undermines that minimum wage where, well, minimum wage is actually more of the higher end of a entry-level paying job. So therefore, there's going to be less of the entry-level paying the high end of that. Because if they can hire people for less, they will. And if they think they can get away with it, which when it's been pretty implicit that we do allow this to happen, when, you know, a lot of these people more than likely have had illegals work on their property. Their landscaping, the construction of the home, somewhere along the line, they benefited from it. So they understand that. Don't let them play dumb. Let's get back to this about the refugees fleeing from ISIS.
Immigration, we need to insist on assimilation and integration. My parents came here legally almost 45 years ago. They came here, they followed the rule of law. They knew English, they adopted the values. They didn't come here to be hyphenated Americans. They're not Indian Americans, they're not Asian Americans, they're Americans. It is important we insist on that in immigration going forward.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Graham, your response when it comes to Syrian refugees.
Yeah, number one, how does President Obama sleep at night? Look what you've let happen on your watch. Your commanders told you don't withdraw from Iraq because we'll lose all of our gains. 3 years ago, your entire national security team, Senator McCain and I begged you to do a no-fly zone and help the Free Syrian Army while it would matter, but you said no. I'm not blaming Bobby, I'm not blaming Rick, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm blaming Barack Obama for this mess.
Thank you, Senator. I want to turn now.
And I want to fix it.
We're going to keep talking about the situation in the Middle East. Let me bring in my colleague, Dana Bash, again.
Thank you. Senator Graham, you mentioned this earlier. You are calling for an additional 20,000 U.S. ground forces to fight ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And you have said, again just this evening, that anyone who's not willing to do that should not be commander-in-chief.
Right.
No one on this stage has gone that far. So are you saying, for Iraq and Syria, are you saying that everybody to your right is not fit for the Oval Office?
I'm saying this, if they don't understand that Barack Obama's policies are not working, that we're not going to destroy ISIL in Iraq and Syria from the air, they are not ready. What have I learned in 35 trips? I learned what works and what doesn't. We were in a good spot in Iraq. President Bush made mistakes, but he adjusted. To those who fought in Iraq, you did your job, and Barack Obama wasted it all. Now we're in a spot where if we don't destroy ISIL soon, they're coming here. There are 3,500 American boots on the ground. You would never know it hearing your president, but we need about 10,000 to turn the tide of battle in Iraq. Then there is nobody left, Dana, to train inside of Syria. We spent $50 million training 54 people, and they're down to 4 or 5. They have been slaughtered, so we're going to need a regional army. The Turks, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Egyptians, get their armies up together, and 90% of it will be them. They're going to pay for this war because we paid for the last two. But 10% at least will have to be us, and we're going in on the ground, and we're going to pull the caliphate up by its roots, and we're going to kill every one of these bastards we can find, because if we don't, they're coming here. Let's get on with it.
Senator Santorum, I know you're raising your hand. You're committing to this number of troops, both in Iraq and on the ground in Syria?
I have proposed 10,000 troops. I did so about 6-7 months ago, that we needed to deploy additional troops to do exactly what Lindsey said, arm the Kurds.
And he's saying 20,000. Would you?
I've said 10,000, and if more is necessary. Look, the answer is this. Once ISIS established a caliphate, the game changed. Because once you establish a caliphate where you have an area of control, you have to take ground from that caliphate. Because if you don't, then in the Islamic world, it's seen as a legitimate caliphate. As long as they have territorial integrity and even expand it, they have legitimacy in much of the Muslim world to call people to join their jihad here in America, as well as in Iraq and in Syria. So we must take their ground.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Jindal?
Look, absolutely. We need to do whatever is necessary to hunt down and kill these radical Islamic terrorists. But this president's his policies have helped to contribute to this problem. He went to the Pentagon the same week they announced they were cutting back the number of troops in the Army to say that we're not going to win this through guns. It's going to be a change of hearts and minds. This will be a generational conflict. That is nonsense. These are barbarians. They are burning, crucifying people alive, Christians and other Muslims. We need to hunt them down and kill them. It starts by having a president willing to call the enemy radical Islamic terrorists.
If I may, does that include American ground forces in Syria as part of a regional army? Are all of you willing to commit to American ground forces going into Syria as part of a regional army to destroy the caliphate at its headquarters?
Governor Pataki? Lindsay, let me comment on this. Last week was the anniversary of September 11th, and I was governor of New York on September 11th and led us through that horrible day. And I learned that we cannot assume that because radical Islam is a continent away, it doesn't pose a threat to us here in America. It did then, and today I think we are at greater risk of an attack than at any time since. We have got to destroy ISIS's ability to attack us here. But it's not 10,000 troops. It's not 20,000 troops. In my view, it's three things. First, we have to directly arm those fighting ISIS on the ground now.
Thank you, Governor. Sorry, we have rules and timing. Governor Jindal, I do want to bring you in. I want to turn to a story in the news today. A 14-year-old Muslim high school student in Texas was arrested on Monday for bringing a homemade clock to school after it was mistaken for a fake bomb. Police released the young man after they determined it was, in fact, a clock. Today, President Obama invited that student to the White House. Governor Jindal, throughout your campaign, you've spoken many times about Muslim extremists in this country. How would you, as president, strike a balance between vigilance and discrimination?
Well, Jake, look, I think the American people, we don't discriminate against anybody based on the color of their skin or their creed. I think the way you strike that balance, you say to Muslim leaders, they've got two responsibilities. One, it's not enough to denounce just simply generic acts of violence. They've got to denounce the individuals by name and say, these aren't martyrs. These terrorists are not martyrs. Rather, they're going straight to hell. They're not going to enjoy a reward in their afterlife. Secondly, they have to explicitly embrace the same freedoms for everybody else they want for themselves. Look, I know it's politically incorrect to say this. The president says Fort Hood was an issue of workplace violence. We're at war with radical Islam. Our president loves to apologize for America. He goes to the National Prayer Breakfast, brings up the Crusades, criticizes Christians. We're at war today with radical Islamic extremists. It's not politically correct to say that, but the way you strike that balance, you say to Muslim leaders, denounce these fools, these radical terrorists by name, say they're not martyrs.
Governor Jindal, I'm afraid you didn't answer the question. How do you strike the balance between vigilance and discrimination? Obviously, we know how you feel about the vigilance part of this. Do you ever see the discrimination part of it?
Sure. I don't think a 14-year-old should ever get arrested for bringing a clock to school. So if you ask me, am I glad he wasn't he was released? I'm glad that police are careful. I'm glad they're worried about security and safety issues. Look, in America, we don't tolerate, right now, the biggest discrimination going on is against Christian business owners and individuals who believe in traditional forms of marriage. They're throwing this woman in jail in Kentucky. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Christian florist, the caterer, the musician who simply want to say, don't arrest us for having or don't discriminate against us, don't shut down our businesses, don't fine us thousands of dollars for believing marriage is between a man and a woman. Let's talk about not discriminating against Christians.
We will get to that subject later in the debate. Senator Graham.
Well, you know, Kim Davis, I'm not worried about her attacking me. I am worried about radical Islamic terrorists who are already here planning another 9/11. We're at war, folks.
What's really getting me is they're going because he has a name. Basically, this is kind of how it's coming across to me, because he has a name like a terrorist might, Islamist terrorist, and he built a clock. We shouldn't worry about him getting arrested for making a clock, because they're just being careful. But the clerk, yeah, we should be more upset about that. And it's just a bunch of warmongering up here is what it seems to be coming down to.
That was a Muslim who said that I don't believe in gay marriage and refused to perform that wedding. We wouldn't have had that outrage. There is a place where the religion supersedes the rule of law. It's called Iran. It shouldn't be the United States.
And we will get to that subject in the next block. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, both Jeb Bush and Donald Trump agree on one thing when it comes to taxes. We'll see if any...
Now, we're looking at a situation where we understand that on both sides of the aisle, you have a lot of maybe, let's say, not out in the open type people on the Democrat side about war. They claim to be anti-war, but as you see with Obama, they keep playing in the same thing. You best bet that Hillary Clinton would be the same way. But really, the Republican side of it are really big warmongers. And I understand the issue with ISIS, but the issue with ISIS also stems from us. There's one that Ben Swan put out. You can find that at truthandmedia.com about how our involvement is actually what is creating this refugee flood, which has empowered ISIS even more. And then you have a lot of animosity towards the U.S., which is a recruitment tool for ISIS. So you start playing all this, and what you really get from the warmongering is we want to continue wars in the Middle East and further destabilize the region, because that's what it does. We can always sit there and pit in these puppet governments, but the moment we withdraw, guess what? Which means that we would have to constantly have large amounts of troops over there, which is just, again, another expansion of the empire. We have, I think it's over 180, well over 180 different countries and 900 and some bases. It's ridiculous. And like I've said in the past, we can build this wall, and people are like, yeah, what? It'll keep people out. It might do that, but it'll also keep people in. Americans could get out if they wanted to. Well, the troops ain't going to shoot the Americans. I said, what troops? The troops in 182 countries, 900 and some bases, and we keep sending more over in the Middle East. We, lose so many of them, or the ones sitting in a box flying a drone. Or the NATO troops that might be sent over here, or any other, foreign troops that might be used here. Because our troops will not be so afraid to shoot a foreigner. And this is just, kind of human nature. That national pride type human behavior. So why they're over in the Middle East or another country keeping that populace under control, other foreign troops will be here keeping us under control. So, we have to be able to look at all sides of this. And, from previous presidential elections when Ron Paul was running, there was commercials by some of the super PACs that, were going, what if China did this? What if China did that here in America? What, we cannot continue the same foreign policy and expect things to change. The Republicans and the Democrats are playing the same game. They're just playing it in a different strategy. Republican strategy, it should be our troops there on the ground. The Democrat strategy, we'll just arm the people to take out Assad. Republicans don't like that because it creates another threat. Democrats don't like putting our own troops on the ground because it makes them look like they're pro-war. But in the end, it's fighting a war. It's funding destabilization in the Middle East. Okay, we're going to go back to the debates here.
Officials passed. But there's a huge difference between an individual standing up and saying, I am going to stand for my religious freedom and my religious rights. I applaud that. This is America. You should be able to engage in your religious belief in the way you see fit. But when you're an elected official and you take an oath of office to uphold the law, all the laws, you cannot pick and choose, or you no longer have a society that depends on the rule of law.
Senator Santorum.
Martin Luther King wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail. And he said in that letter that there are just laws and there are unjust laws. And we have no obligation to condone and accept unjust laws. And then he followed up and said, what's an unjust law? An unjust law is a law that go against the moral code or God's law or the natural law. I would argue that what the Supreme Court did is against the natural law, it's against God's law, and we have every obligation to stand in opposition to it.
Jake?
Yeah, I didn't agree with the Supreme Court's decision, but it is the law of this land. And I'm a great admirer of Martin Luther King, and he was prepared to break the law. But it wasn't in an office of political power. It was civil disobedience, where what he was willing to do is voluntarily go to jail with his followers to send a message to the elected representatives that these laws were wrong and had to be changed. And because of his courage, we didn't ignore the courts. We changed the laws and made America a better place. That's the way to do it.
Thank you, Governor.
Jake,
what comment about you?
Jake, I've got a practical question. I've got a practical question. I'd like the left to give us a list of jobs that Christians aren't allowed to have. If we're not allowed to be clerks, bakers, musicians, caterers, are we allowed to be pastors
Governor
anymore?
Jindal.
We're not allowed to be elected officials. I just want to make this is an important point. The First Amendment rights, the right to religious freedom is in the First Amendment of the Constitution. It isn't breaking the law to exercise our constitutional rights. America did not create religious liberty. Religious liberty created the United States of America. It is the reason we're here today.
Senator Graham, do you want to weigh in?
I wasn't the best law student. By the end of this debate, it'd be the most time I've ever spent in any library. But on the first day in law school, Hugh, it's called Marbury versus Madison. The group in our constitutional democracy that interprets the Constitution as to what it means is the Supreme Court. In a 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court, they have ruled that same-sex marriage bans at the state level violate the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, Equal Protection Clause. I don't agree with it, but that is the law of the land. But as president, what I want to make sure of is that everybody in this room, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever religion, that you can practice your faith without government interference. You can marry people consistent with the tenets of your faith. That's the number one obligation of my presidency, is to protect religious people when they exercise their religious rights. But this decision is the law as it is of right now. And here's the one thing I want to tell you,
Thank
Jake.
you, Senator.
Wait a minute. Were you the wedding cake baker or the gay couple or the Baptist preacher? Radical Islam would kill you all if they could.
Senator,
let's don't lose sight of the big picture here.
Thank you, Senator. I want to stay with the subject of Supreme Court justices. Governor Jindal, both Senators Graham and Santorum voted to confirm Chief Justice of the United States John Roberts, who has led with the majority twice to uphold Obamacare. Do you think that Graham's and Santorum's votes to confirm John Roberts were a mistake?
I think absolutely putting Roberts, I think putting Kennedy, I think putting before them, I think putting Souter on the bench was a mistake. But look, I think the first responsibility starts in the White House. The reality is conservatives have not been willing to stand up for our beliefs. Unlike the liberals, look, you never worry about where the Democratic judges are going to vote. It's always the conservatives. You've never had a Democratic judge wake up and say, surprise, I've evolved, I've become a conservative. It's always the Republicans because we have presidents that try to find judges with no records, no rulings, no writings. I'll tell you, I am going to have a litmus test. For judges, I'm going to find judges that are conservative, judges that are going to be pro-life, judges that are going to follow the Constitution. Judges, by the way, they're going to follow the American law, not international law. They're not appointed there to interpret international law. They're there to apply the United States Constitution. Judges understand their job's not to write law. If they want to write law, they should run for the Senate or the House. It's time for a Republican president as the next commander-in-chief. I will do as the Democrats have done. I will appoint bold judges that are actually consistent with my values, that'll be conservatives, and then force the Senate to confirm them.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Graham, I want to give you an opportunity to respond. I would note that Anthony Kennedy was, of course, a Ronald Reagan appointee. Senator Graham, do you stand by your vote for John Roberts?
He is one of the most qualified men to ever come before the United States Senate, and I don't agree with his decision, but 99 times out of 100, I will. To the Republicans, the biggest prize on the table in 2017 is the presidency. If it is Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, or Bernie Sanders, they're going to pick people that we will disagree with all the time. Please understand we have to win this election. The court's at stake. It is the most important reason for us to turn out to make sure we don't lose the judiciary for decades to come.
Senator Santorum, do you stand by your vote for John Roberts?
Well, contrary to what Governor Jindal said, Justice Roberts had a long record, and it was a long, good record. And so he made a bad decision on a couple of bad decisions on Obamacare, but he's made a lot of great decisions too. And so I don't regret at all standing up for John Roberts. But you know, it's easy to sit out in Louisiana and talk about how well I'd be tougher. I fought when I was in the United States Senate. We fought for the first time to defeat justices and judges that Bill Clinton nominated, and I fought with President Bush to defend his nominees, to push even a filibuster, breaking the filibuster. I led that fight against some who didn't want to end the filibuster in order for us to get good conservative justice. So I have been there on the front line fighting for judges and conservative justices, and I will do so as president like none other.
Governor Jindal, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you, too. Look, it's not a minor ruling. Justice Roberts twice rewrote the law to save Obamacare, the biggest expansion of government, creating a new entitlement when we can't afford the government we've got today, an expansion of socialism in our country. It's not that he got a minor ruling wrong. This is twice he rewrote the law. I have a lot of respect for these senators that have big bladders. They give great speeches in the Senate, and I respect that. I've actually signed the executive order. I've actually signed the law protecting religious liberty in the state of Louisiana.
I want to kind of cover something because it's funny when they go into this, and I posted a picture. It actually came from Free Talk Live. Let me get to it real quick. Sorry, it's going to take me a second here. And I think this little picture really kind of points it out pretty well. Republicans proudly support the Constitution and the 10th Amendment, except for federal funding for school lunches, federal unemployment benefits, federal foreign aid payments, federal food stamp program, federal discrimination laws, federal welfare programs, federal health insurance, federal drug prohibition, federal aid to education, federal farm subsidies, federal gambling laws, federal health care, federal Pell Grants. Pretty spot on, I would say. And back to the debates here.
time to have term limits. I think it's time to have part-time citizen legislators. Let's pay them a per diem instead of a six-figure salary. Stop them from being seven-figure lobbyists. Let's also pay them a per diem for every day they don't go to D.C. Let's keep them out of D.C. Working in the real. Let's make them live under the same rules and laws they apply to the rest of us. Not only shouldn't they be elected, they can't be elected. Let's fire all of them from their current positions.
Senator Graham, I took a shot at you. You're having a good debate, but there is this problem of Washington elites and saying wonderful things about each other.
I've been called a lot of things, but never elite before. My dad owned a liquor store or bar and a pool room. So only in America can you go from the back of the liquor store to being an elite.
Is that responsive to calling Hillary Clinton a national treasure, Senator?
I introduced her at a conference about Africa. I thought Secretary Clinton did a good job when it came to dealing with our problems in Africa, particularly among women. George W. Bush set $40 billion aside, and Rick Santorum helped him. And President Bush wiped out AIDS and malaria for an entire generation of young African children. Secretary Clinton did a good job. Here's my problem, Secretary Clinton. Where the hell were you on the night of the Benghazi attack? How did you let it become a death trap to begin with? And why did you lie about what happened to these people? And if you want a new change in terms of foreign policy, don't pick her because she's his Secretary of State. I've got a real good chance of beating her because I don't say things bad about her all the time, just when she deserves it. And her definition of flat broken mind are a little bit different.
But, Senator, can you go back and forth that way and expect to have an argument with the American people to persuade them about that?
Ronald Reagan did a couple of really big things that we should all remember. He sat down with Tip O'Neill, the most liberal guy in the entire House. They started drinking together. That's the first thing I'm going to do as president. We're going to drink more. And what did these two great Irishmen do? They found a way to save Social Security from bankruptcy by adjusting the age of retirement from 65 to 67. So, yes, I will say nice things at times about Democrats. Yes, I will work with them. I will put the country ahead of party. Absolutely, I want to work with them. At the end of the day, Hugh, I'm lucky to be standing here. I'm the first in my family to ever go to college. Neither one of my parents finished high school. Darlene's here with me tonight. We owned a restaurant. But wait a minute. I understand. You asked me a question. This is important. Republicans need to tell the American people we get it as to who you are. When my mom died, I was 21. When my dad died when I was 22, we were wiped out financially. If it weren't for a Social Security survivor benefit check coming into Darlene, we wouldn't have made it. I don't need a lecture from Democrats about Social Security. I want to save it, just like Ronald Reagan did.
Let's talk about the economy, if we could. Governor Pataki.
Yes.
Jeb Bush and Donald Trump are both proposing raising taxes on hedge fund managers who pay at a lower rate. Governor Pataki, you were the governor of New York, home of Wall Street. Do you agree that hedge fund managers need to be paying a higher rate?
I would throw out the entire corrupt tax code. It's a symbol of the corruption and the power of the lobbyists and the special interest in Washington. It is 74,000 pages of incomprehensible gobbledygook. What I would do is get rid of that $1.4 trillion every year in exemptions and loopholes, dramatically lower the rates. The normal American person is paying higher taxes than they should because of loopholes, and one of them is that carried interest loophole. I would tax that income the same as ordinary income. I'd lower the rate to 24% for all Americans, but I would not give a special break to the Wall Street fat caps.
So you are with Jeb Bush and Donald Trump on the hedge fund?
It's hard for me to say that I'm with Donald Trump on anything, but on this issue, I agree with them. But let me just make one other point. It's not just throwing out the tax code to break the back of the special interests that control Washington. It's other reforms. I would propose a law. Right now, there are over 400 former members of the House and Senate who are registered lobbyists in Washington. I would propose a law day one. You serve one day in the House or Senate, there is a lifetime ban on your ever being a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. You get elected, you go back home. You don't stay and support the special interests.
Governor Jindal, That's 3 Republicans running for president who support hedge fund managers paying a higher rate. Are you the 4th?
2 things, Jake. One, I'm absolutely for ending all these carve-outs and loopholes and special interests for those they get lobbyists. They get sweetheart deals you and I and the rest of this audience couldn't get. So as a part of overall comprehensive tax reform that has a lower, flatter tax code, sure. As a single item just to raise taxes, no. I don't want to give the government more money. Government has grown under this president where now it is going to overwhelm the American economy. We've got to cut the size of the government economy. Nobody else running for president has done that. I am the only candidate. I've cut my state budget 26%. Everybody else talks about it. We have done it. So as a part of overall tax reform that cuts rates, flattens and lowers the tax code, sure, but I'm not for raising taxes on anybody. We already have too much money going to D.C.
Let's stay on the topic of taxes. I want to bring in my colleague, Dana Bash.
Senator Santorum, you just heard Governor Jindal and Governor Patel.
Now, he said he cut, spending. Now, where people cut spending makes a big difference, too. Let's cut spending to the welfare, but increase the police state. Might be a problem.
20% flat tax on capital gains and on corporations. We eliminate all the deductions, special interest provisions in corporations. We deal with the carried interest issue because everybody pays the same 20%. So there's no advantage as to how you take your income. That will create growth. We're going to allow expensing for corporations. For manufacturing, again, I pledged when I announced that I was going to run for president on a factory floor that I would make America the #1 manufacturer in the world. Why? Because we need to put Americans back to work. Hardworking Americans who are not doing well in this economy. And we start creating jobs here in manufacturing. People from all skill levels are going to be able to work. We put a 20% rate on corporations. We're competitive with almost every country in the world. We allow for expensing. We have a 3-year phase-in. We start at 0 for manufacturers, phase it up to 20. You're going to see an enormous investment of capital and equipment. You're going to see people, you're going to have problems finding folks who are going to be able to work in manufacturing. That's how many jobs we're going to create. So the answer is, we're going to lower and flatten taxes. We're going to put government on a budget, a 10% across the board.
Time's up, Senator.
In employment, we've got a lot of plans.
Okay, time's up, Senator. And Governor, just to bring you back into this, you said that you would be okay with what is effectively raising taxes on hedge fund managers as part of a tax reform plan. Would you also be for doing away with people's deductions for their mortgage interest?
No, I would not. I would keep that deduction. I would lower the rates dramatically. So, yes, that group that has a special carve-out would pay more, but everybody else is going to pay less. I would keep the home mortgage deduction, the charitable deduction, and others. And by the way, I agree with Rick on manufacturing, but my approach is different. I would pass a rate on manufacturing of 12%, the lowest in the developed world, so we can make things in America again. I know how important those jobs are. When I went through college, Christmas and summer vacations, I worked in a factory. My grandparents worked in a factory. We have the opportunity now, with lower energy costs, with the world labor costs getting higher, to make things in America so we don't have to worry about China. Lower the tax burden on manufacturing, improve the work skills of Americans, get rid of job-killing regulations.
Thank you,
We're
Governor.
going to make things in America.
Well, we're going to come, you're going to be involved in the next question. Senator Graham.
He talked about it, that he would be better.
And you notice how they always talk about lowering taxes for these big factories, these big corporations, and the factories do get tax breaks. A lot of states give all these big corporations and factories these tax breaks, but it's a lot harder for the mom and pop stores to find tax breaks for the little guy, the little hardware store, because again, they want to cater to the corporations, not the little store owners, the mom and pops. We already know that it's been a war on mom and pop by corporations and politicians for a long time.
The pool room, that if you increase the minimum wage, it'd been hard to hire more people. Hillary Clinton has a list a mile long to help the middle class. We're talking all around this. The middle class for the last 6.5 years has been squeezed and squeezed hard. To the middle class, I understand who you are. You're one broken down car from not going on vacation. You're from one sick child away from having to change your whole budget. Here's what I want to do as your president. I want to grow this economy. When Boeing came to South Carolina to build a 787, everybody paid more. They would have lost their employees to Boeing. If you're a waitress out there wanting more money, I'm not going to increase the minimum wage. I'm going to try to create an environment where somebody else will open up a restaurant across the street to hire you away at a higher rate, or they'll have to pay you more to keep you. You got to borrow money to create jobs in this country. Banking is locked down because of Dodd-Frank. The tax code is a complete mess. But nobody's talked about the elephant in the room, which is debt. Not one more penny to the federal government until we come up with a plan to get out of debt.
Senator Graham, thank you so much. Senator Santorum. Senator Graham is suggesting that your proposal would not allow South Carolinians to hire more workers.
Lindsay, what percentage of American workers make the minimum wage right now?
It's probably a small bit, but
less
the ones
than
that
1%.
Yeah, but
so what you're basically saying, whatever Republicans up here saying is we're against the minimum wage. Because if you're not for increasing it, and nobody's making the minimum wage right now, the answer is that Republicans don't believe in a floor wage in America. Fine, you go ahead and make that case to the American public. I'm not going to. Not from a party that supported bailouts. I didn't, but this party did. Not from a party that supports special interest tax provisions for a whole bunch of other businesses. But when it comes to hardworking Americans who are at the bottom of the income scale, we can't provide some level of income support. What I proposed is not anything what the president's proposed. I believe that would be harmful to the American public. But a 50 cents an hour increase over 3 years, which is what I'm proposing. So we would have a minimum wage which would be roughly in the area of what it's been historically, about 5% of wages. To me, if you're going to talk to 90% of American workers, by the way, 90% of American workers don't own a bar. They don't own a business. They work for a living. Most of them are wage earners. And Republicans are losing elections because we're not talking about them. All we want to talk about is what happened to our business. There are people who work in that business. I was at the convention 4 years ago. And on the signs, on all of the seats the night I spoke was a sign that said, "We built that." Because Barack Obama had talked about how businesses didn't build their own businesses. Then we trotted out one small business person after another for almost an hour that night, talking about how they built their businesses. And that's wonderful. But you know what we didn't do? We didn't bring one worker on that stage. How are you going to win, ladies and gentlemen? How are we going to win if 90% of Americans don't think we care at all about them and their chance to rise?
Thank you, Senator. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, confrontation or negotiation.
Now, you know, he kind of brings up a good point, but none of them are talking about, you know, if you want to talk about, oh, we shouldn't increase the minimum wage. Okay, I agree, because that really doesn't solve any of the problem. Where does the problem really lie? Part of it's the devaluation of the dollar. The dollar gets devalued through inflation and the monetary policy, which causes that minimum wage that maybe, let's say you're a 19-year-old out of high school, maybe in college, that minimum wage is giving you some money. But let's say 3 years down the road, another 19-year-old gets that same job at that same minimum wage. That minimum wage is now not giving that 19-year-old a fair chance to be able to pay his rent, his electricity bill, for his housing, and his books for college. But 3 years ago, that minimum wage was able to get a 19-year-old through it. And sometimes have a little money for a party. Well, that's because that money has been devalued through inflation, meaning that it takes more dollars to buy the same thing. You know, 1 year it was one wheelbarrow full of money, next year it's two. They're not talking about the monetary policy. They're talking about, they're really just talking about the minimum wage. Should we increase it or should we decrease it? And both Santorum and Graham actually point out some things, but I don't think they're truly sincere on them. Graham said bringing in more business will also help, bring wages up. But again, they're talking about, he was using Boeing as an example. Bringing in a factory job, but not talking about the small business owner. That local cafe. A chain might get a tax break because they can put 5 stores in. But the little cafe, they don't talk about. Now, Santorum points out we don't talk about the workers. The workers have to do a lot with companies surviving. If you do not have good workers, you're not going to have a successful business. So, again, that'll play actually into the whole thing. If you're paying your workers well and you're insisting on good work, you might get somewhere. Insist on good work, but pay your workers a pretty dismal wage, you might not get the performance and the quality that you're expecting. But we'll get back here into these debates.
Strike against Iran's nuclear facilities.
If I believe they were trying to break out and get a bomb, absolutely. And here's the most important thing. They know I would if I had to. And none of us are going to be able to defend this country adequately until we rebuild our military. A weak economy, a military in decline, the world on fire. Does that sound familiar to you? Michael, does that sound familiar to you? The first thing I'm going to do as Commander-in-Chief on day one is call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and say, what do you need that you don't have? We're cutting our military. We're on track to have the smallest army since 1940, the smallest navy since 1915, and John Kasich says he wants to close more bases. I want to rebuild our military, and I want the Iranians to know that if I had to, I would use it. The worst nightmare in the world is a radical Islamic regime with a weapon of mass destruction. The only reason 3,000 of us died on 9/11 is not 3 million, and not 3 million is because they couldn't get the weapons to kill us. They're on track to get a bomb even if they don't cheat. This deal is a nightmare for Israel. They're coming here if we don't watch it. Terrorism with a nuclear capability sponsored by Iran. So, yes, I would use military force to stop them. I would set this deal aside, and I would get you a better deal. If you gave me $100 billion, I could get almost anybody out of jail. We couldn't even get our hostages out of jail.
Governor, Hugh, I'm going to go to Hugh Hewitt for a question for Governor Pataki.
There are other ways, Governor, than bombing Iran. I want to quote Rick Santorum. We should send a very clear message that if you are a scientist and you're going to work on a nuclear program to develop a bomb for Iran, you are not safe. Does that message work? Does anything that works on the table?
Not on the table, but I think there's a lot that does work. And that is to have a strong America, a strong military, and a resolve where the Iranians know that not only are we going to reject this deal on day one and reimpose sanctions, but if they move forward with the nuclear program, their safety for those facilities will be at risk. I'll tell you a couple of things I do. I give the Israelis bombs called MOPs, massive ordnance penetrators. Give them to Israel. Let the Iranians know we're prepared to work with Israel to make sure they never have a nuclear weapon. And let me point out that Hillary Clinton is supporting this deal. She was the senator from New York on September 11th. She saw what happened at the hands of radical Islam. This is the senator who did the reset program with Russia, who allowed the Middle East to deteriorate to flames, who has lied about Benghazi and is now supporting the Iranian deal. That's the opponent we are going to have next November. We have got to win this election. Everything we say is wonderful, but we have to win. And once we win, we have to actually do what we say. I can do this.
Senator Santorum, staying on that. Any means necessary? Is that what you meant to say? Is that what's still on the table after this, what many of us believe is a catastrophic deal?
As you know, Hugh, 12 years ago, I authored the Iran Freedom Support Act, which put sanctions on the Iranian nuclear program. As we came within 4 votes of passing a very strong version of that. The 4 people who opposed me on the floor, Joe Biden, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama. And we came 4 votes short, but for 12 years, I have been laser beam focused on the issue of Iran with a nuclear weapon. Why? Because I understand who they are. Yes, they're radical Islamists, that's true. But they're a particular version of it, which is an apocalyptic version, which is a death cult. They believe in bringing about the end of the world. If you poll Iranians and Iraqis, Shiites in the region, more than 2/3 of them believe that the end of the world is going to come within their lifetime. Why? Because their regime preaches it. They believe in bringing about the end of times. That's their theological goal. And we are in the process of giving them a nuclear weapon to do just that. That's why on day one, I would say to the Iranian government, you open up all of these facilities for inspection. You make them available to the UN and to the US, everything. We can go everywhere, or else we will take out those facilities. And when people say you're going to start a war, my response is, no, I'm going to stop a war, because a nuclear Iran is the end.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Graham?
Jake, I'd like to answer that question.
We're bringing you in this question as well. Senator Graham, Vladimir Putin in recent days has sent an estimated 6 more tanks, 4 helicopters, and Russian ground troops into Syria to help support President Assad, an enemy of the United States. The Russian military is also buzzing American planes and naval vessels around the world. Your frontrunner, Donald Trump, says he can do deals with President Putin, that the two of them will get along, quote, very well. Why would your confrontational approach work better than Mr. Trump's negotiation?
Do you think Putin would be in the Ukraine or Syria today if Ronald Reagan were president? No. This is what happens when you have a weak, unqualified commander-in-chief who doesn't understand the role America plays in the world. Why is it bad for you that Russia is helping Assad? He's the magnet for Sunni extremists. The Syrian people are not going to accept him as their legitimate leader. By Assad being helped by Russia, it means the war never ends. It means the next 9/11, which is most likely to occur from an attack from Syria, is more likely. At the end of the day, if I'm president of the United States, I've told you what I'm going to do. There's nobody left in Syria to train. We're going to get a regional army who doesn't like...
Completely ignoring the fact that we helped destabilize Syria.
Destroy the caliphate, pull it up by its roots, and we're going to hold the territory. This is a slap in the face from Putin to Kerry and Obama. Assad must go. If he doesn't go, this war never ends. And if the war in Syria continues, it is coming here. For God's sakes, let's get on with fixing the problem in Syria.
Governor Jindal, how would President Jindal get the Russians out of Syria?
Well, Jake, I want to answer that question. I want to go back to Iran. I didn't get a chance to answer that as well. Look, on Russia, across the world, dictators walk all over this president. He treats our friends like dirt. He lets our enemies walk all over us. The only group he's able to out-negotiate are the Senate Republicans. They never should have passed this bad Corker bill. Instead of a 2/3 vote to approve the Iran deal, it now takes a 2/3 vote to reject the Iran deal. I want to ask Lindsay a question. Will the Senate Republicans, they still have time, are they willing to use the nuclear option, meaning get rid of the filibuster, to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power? Now is the time for the Senate Republicans to stand up and fight. We are tired of the establishment saying there's nothing we can do. All night tonight we've heard Republicans say things like, well, the Supreme Court's ruled, there's nothing I can do about religious liberty. You know, the president did this, there's nothing we can do about it for 2 more years. There is something we can do. We won the Senate, we won the House. What was the point of winning those chambers if we're not going to do anything with them? You're going back tonight. You still have time before the Thursday deadline. Will y'all use the nuclear option to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power?
Bobby, you were in the Congress, and all I can tell you to everybody here, if you want to repeal Obamacare, get a new president. If you want to defund Planned Parenthood, elect a pro-life president, because that's the only way. If we passed the Cardin bill, Graham-Menendez, it would go to the president. He would veto it. 67 votes are required to override the veto.
Well, and Lindsey,
Wait a minute. Now, you asked me a question. So I don't want to take off the table the ability to slow down Obama in his last 13 or 14 months, because I want 60 votes to stop what I think he's going to do between now and January 2017. 5 Republicans leave, we're in trouble. So, folks, the world really is the way it is. President Obama is president. The goal is to get him out of there and pick somebody who would actually do something to repeal Obamacare, who would get you a better agreement. So, Bobby, he would veto the bill. We don't have 67 votes, and you had given away a defense against Obama for the rest of his presidency. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell you things I can't do. I'm not going to tell you by shutting the government down, we're going to defund Obamacare as long as he's president. All that does is hurt us. I'm trying to lead this party to winning.
Lindsey, well, that's my frustration. Listen to what you heard. You basically heard a Senate Republican say we can't defund Planned Parenthood despite these barbaric videos.
Are you going to shut the government down?
We can't get rid of Obamacare. Lindsey, let me answer this question now. I wish the Senate Republicans had half the fight in them the Senate Democrats did. Look, President Obama didn't give up on Obamacare when they lost the Senate election in Massachusetts. I want my side to follow the Constitution. They broke the Constitution. They broke the law. But they forced Obamacare down our throats even when they didn't have 60 votes. I wish Republicans in D.C. had half the fight of the Senate Democrats to get rid of Obamacare, to defund Planned Parenthood. If we can't defund Planned Parenthood now, if we can't stand for innocent human life after these barbaric videos, it is time to be done with the Republican Party. We defunded them in Louisiana. Let's defund them in D.C. If we can't win on that issue, there is no point for being cheaper Democrats, no point for having a second liberal party. It is time to get rid of the Republican Party, start over with a new one that's at least conservative. Give Harry Reid and Pelosi credit. At least they fight for what they believe in. I want senators and House members in D.C. to fight for what we believe in as well. It's time to have Republicans with a backbone in D.C.
Can I just say something? You know, Bobby, we're running to be president of the United States, the most important job in the free world. With it comes a certain amount of honesty. I'm tired of telling people things they want to hear that I know we can't do. He is not going to sign a bill that would defund Obamacare. If I am president of the United States, I wouldn't put 1 penny in my budget for Planned Parenthood. Not 1 penny. I'm as offended by these videos as you are. But the one thing I'm not going to do going into 2016 is shut the government down and taint our ability to win. What you're saying and what Senator Cruz is saying, I am really sick of hearing. Trying to get the Republican Party in a position to win is what I'm trying to do. And that does matter to me.
Thank you, Senator. The final questions for these 4 Republicans as the top contenders get ready to take their places on the debate stage when we come back right after this.
Okay. Now, when it comes to Planned Parenthood, I think there's something important that was brought up there. You know, after all these barbaric videos, you can't defund. This isn't banning Planned Parenthood. This is not giving taxpayer money. And after all these videos and the recent one that's come out, if you can't just say that, you know, that even for a lot of more liberal people, that what's in those videos they even look at is pretty barbaric. And they kind of realize that a lot of times people probably don't realize they're giving consent to this. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that agreed or pro-choice, but will see this and not agree with it. To give any group, I think, taxpayer money, subsidies, is one of the worst things. You're stealing from the poor to give to the rich. That is what you're doing. And not all the time, but in a lot of times, yeah, it is. Or you're stealing from the poor to give to the poor. Either way, you don't tend to come out on top in those situations. And I think that we should be able to defund Planned Parenthood. And you know, if you're for it, you want to help donate to Planned Parenthood, guess what? If you want tax, take that money and then donate to whatever groups you want. But we're in a situation where not only do we go, yeah, killing of babies is okay in our society, which I'm not going to force someone not to hurt themselves and their unborn child, because, well, you would have to be one of those pre-crime people, and then you would have to forcibly hold someone that hasn't done anything wrong yet. And then again, you know, there's a lot of issues that go into that. I'm not for it. I don't agree with it. But, you know, if there's an abortion clinic, they're throwing themselves down flights of stairs, going to these underground ones. There's a lot of issues, but what makes it the biggest issue is money is stolen from you to pay for it, to support these groups that you may completely disagree with. And I know Twitter's been lighting up over this debate and basically just calling out all the BS that we're hearing. You know, people are like, you are a Republican. I'm not. I was a Ron Paul supporter, so at one point I was a registered Republican. But I'm definitely have a lot of liberal points of view, a lot of conservative points of view. But in the end, my philosophy and my beliefs in the ability for other people to have authority over others stands at a libertarian point of view. And a lot of these Tea Partyists that call themselves libertarians are not truly libertarian. They hold some libertarian ideology, but they are not what a libertarian would ever call a libertarian. And it's good, though, that they hold, you know, a wide viewpoint on many things and have libertarian viewpoints, but they aren't truly libertarian. But back to this debate here.
White House back for our party. But more importantly, once I've won, I will put in place a sweeping conservative agenda. I did that in New York. Over $143 billion in tax cuts, more than the other 49 states combined, taking 1 million more people off welfare and putting them into jobs in a state where the Democrats control the state assembly 103 to 47. I got them to support a conservative agenda. If I get elected president, I will make things work in Washington for the Republican Party and for the United States.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Santorum.
I came to Washington in the most unlikely way. I defeated a 14-year incumbent in a 60% Democratic district. I went to Washington thinking I was only going to be there for one term. And so I just shook things up. We sent the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee to jail. We ended 40 years of Democratic control of the Congress. And I led that fight with reforms. Substantive reforms, welfare reform. I wrote the bill when I was in the House. I led the charge in the United States Senate. Partial birth abortion. In fact, 3 pro-life bills. Bipartisan pro-life bills. I mentioned the Iran bill. We also passed one on Syria. Health savings accounts, many of you know. I authored the original bill on health savings accounts, pushed that through the Congress for private sector health care reform. An outsider who came to Washington from a tough state of Pennsylvania and we got conservative things done. I made things happen in a town where things don't happen very much. Now, after 10 years of seeing the mess, the retreat that we see in the Republican Party in Washington, D.C., it's time to get someone who's an outsider.
Thank you, Senator.
Who can go to Washington, D.C. and knows how to get things done. And you know what? You have a lot of folks who will tell you a lot of things. Look at their record. I went to Washington as an outsider, shook things up, got things done, and that's why you can trust me to do it again.
Thank you, Senator Santorum. Governor Jindal, what is something that you offer as a candidate that the other 11 candidates coming on stage in a few minutes cannot offer?
Jake, I'm a doer, not a talker. Look, the idea of America is slipping away from us. If you want somebody that's going to manage the slow decline of this country, make incremental changes, vote for somebody else. If you want to vote for somebody who understands what's at stake, Planned Parenthood is selling baby parts across this country, and the Senate Republicans have already given up, even without a fight. I'm tired of the surrender caucus. I'm angrier at the Republicans in D.C. than I am at the president. The president's a socialist. At least he fights what he believes in. We don't need to just send any Republican to the White House. We need to send somebody who understands it's time to make big changes. It's time to take on the establishment. It's time to take on the D.C. permanent governing class. Every Republican says they'll shrink the size of the government. I'm the only one that has done it. Cut our budget 26%. If you want somebody that's going to make incremental change, vote for somebody else. It's time to get the idea of America back. At some point, we're going to be held accountable. We'll be asked, what did you do when the idea of America was slipping away? I'll promise you this. I will fight for you. I will give every ounce of blood, energy, sweat I've got to save the idea of America, the greatest country in the history of the world.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Graham?
Well, number one, I will win a war that we can't afford to lose. I have a plan to destroy radical Islam because it has to be. These are religious Nazis running wild. President Obama has made one mistake after another, and it has caught up with us. What do I have to offer that's different? I get my foreign policy from being on the ground. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan, the Mideast 35 times in the last decade, trying to understand how we got in this mess. Our leading candidate gets his foreign policy from watching television. And what I heard last night is the Cartoon Network, ooh, I'm big, I'm strong, we're going to hit him in the head. That's not foreign policy. That's a cartoon character. John Kasich, a good friend of mine, said in New Hampshire, we're going to close more bases on his watch. On my watch, we're going to open up more bases. The military is in decline, folks. We're going to have the smallest military in modern times, spending half of what we would normally spend by the end of this decade.
Thank you, Senator.
What do I offer? What do I offer? To make your family safe and our country strong again, a vision and a determination to win a war that we cannot afford to lose.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Our thanks to the candidates for a great debate. In just a moment, we're bringing the candidates from both of tonight's debates together for a group photo. It will be a first in this campaign. And then, of course, the main event, the top 11 candidates going head-to-head. I will be back as moderator. Right now, let's go to my colleague, Anderson Cooper.
Okay. Now, these are the smaller candidates. More than likely, none of them will be at the top tier. There's still a chance. But for now, they aren't even breaking into the top tier. But they echo something that the Republican Party just will not let go of, and it's the warmongering, the fear porn, as one of the chatters in the chat room had mentioned. We are looking basically at the same old rhetoric and propaganda put out by the GOP, and they do it in a way that they try to appease certain groups of Americans, and they do a decent job, because what they also do is, well, they can use fear-mongering with people that have bought into a lot of the propaganda. So, you know, oh, those Iranians and the illegal immigrants, and we'll get mad at everybody but ourselves. And that helps distract people. and it helps the rhetoric get passed. And then they actually throw in things that, in a domestic sense, would sound great about making government smaller and we'll not have so much Big Brother, and it just, it's all BS because we know exactly what happens under every single one of these presidents. Government grows, wars continue, taxes go up, the dollar in your pocket goes down, and the rich get rich and the poor get poor. And we look at all the possibilities that could come out of this GOP. You have Donald Trump that is definitely doing good in the polls, but we can see that shatter. There's plenty of time for him to say or do something extremely stupid. And, it really wouldn't surprise me. And then you got, right now they're showing Arnold Schwarzenegger walking through and shaking hands. And, if this is a company that you like to keep, I think it really shows how serious you are. Just saying. It's a dog and pony show. It's when you do have serious candidates, you have people like Ron Paul. And no matter how good they do, when they come in second place in the Iowa straw poll, very, very close to coming in first place, but we won't even mention him. And I think Rand Paul has been trying to play the game, has bought into some of it, and therefore you can't be on the fence area with your ideology. See, one thing about his father is his father was a libertarian ideologist. That's the philosophy he believed in. He knew that it wasn't something that could happen overnight. He knew he didn't have the ability to do a lot, but what he could do is put the first stepping stones down to lead that path, and again, it would fall upon society to go along with and stop more intrusions. But that's why they're not going to let him get in there. Rand Paul, he's not going to have the support of a lot of those Ron Paul supporters. It's not going to be there because he's tried to be on that fence with, hey, I'm a Republican like the rest of them, that the Republican base that always votes for whatever Republicans nominated, I'm one of those guys. Check out, my campaign. While he's going to libertarians, I believe in the libertarian stuff. They're like, you're courting the other side quite a bit. Well, I'm trying to court you guys too. Well, you can't have both sides of it, and there was such a grassroots movement behind Ron Paul that you're not seeing behind Rand Paul. Even though, honestly, in the end of it, if someone was going to be president out of the whole field, Republicans and Democrats, I think Rand Paul would probably be the best, and I'm not too highly enthused about him. But he would still be the best. He would be the best of the worst. And hopefully he would take advice from his father. And, at the end of the day, I think that we really have to become more liberty and freedom minded people and understand things like the non-aggression principle and the bartering system and alternative currencies, and we have to basically start breaking out of the system because the system is not going to change for us. The best way we can do it, I think, is more at a local level and just being more community oriented, because that is one way that they have transformed this nation from 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Even though you had you blacks over here, whites over here, the communities themselves were pretty tight. All the communities, even though they were still being discriminated against, the community itself were strong. That's how the civil rights movement was able to happen. People don't talk to their neighbors. It's more, can I report my neighbor for something? And you'd be surprised how a close-knit community can benefit, and you to do that without creating extreme situations. You also have to be accepting of different cultures, different people, as long as they're not harming you, not harming people, not harming property. If you just kind of put your adult panties on and understand that, hey, they respect my right to live my life the way I choose. And you know what? If they see me needing help, they'll be willing to come over, and I'll be willing to help them when they need help. You have a tight-knit community. It's like, holy crap, people can disagree on things and get along. And guess what? Then you can tell the governments to get the hell out of your business. We got this. And you're still going to have bad people. You're still going to have things go wrong. It's about, we don't need the middleman to take care of the problems, because that's really what government becomes, a middleman that'll take money and just, pass portions of that money along. Therefore, it costs you a hell of a lot more to get the same thing done. We are coming up to the end of the broadcast. So definitely stay tuned here on UCY.TV for all the great broadcasts coming up after this. After this is the Continual Condition with Jonathan and Steven. Then it's Truther Talk Radio with April and Versine. 11 o'clock, it's Anti-Media Radio with Nick and DB. 12 midnight, Nuclear Hot Seat with Libby. Hey, Levy. So stay tuned, and don't forget to check out the UCY store. If you go to UCY.tv and click the UCY store tab, it'll take you to the partner site store with Amazon. Get the same great prices, same great deals. UCY's put a collection of camping, prepping, radiation preparation gear. Great prices through Amazon, but UCY gets kickback to help cover operating costs because we can't do this for free. And UCY gives hosts like me and the others on this network somewhere to voice our opinion and spread the news. So definitely go check them out. And you know what? When we talk about alternative currencies, one of my big choices is gold and silver, but it's not my only. I'm willing to diversify But if you don't have any gold or silver, check out Amagi Metals. If you go to antityrannynews.com/metal, it'll take you straight to Amagi Metals. Same great deals again, and helps cover those. Check out. Great price. Oh, thank you.